Oswald Mosley was born on November 16, 1896, in Mayfair, London on Hill Street. His father, Sir Oswald Mosley, was the 5th Baronet Mosley, a title introduced in the 17th century as a lower rank of nobility. The Mosleys belonged to the minor British aristocracy and enjoyed significant financial independence. Their family history could be traced back to the 12th century during Norman rule in England. Sir Oswald Mosley Sr. briefly served in the military during Oswald's early years, spending time in Egypt, which was under British control. This was largely due to Britain's interest in maintaining access to the Suez Canal, a vital route to British India. Oswald's mother, Catherine Maud Edwards Heathcote, also came from the minor nobility and had strong ties to the military. The family's wealth extended back to Sir John Heathcote, who became a major business figure during the early stages of the Industrial Revolution in Staffordshire. Oswald was the eldest of 3 children. His younger brothers, Edward and John Arthur, were born in 1899 and 1901, respectively. Despite growing up in a wealthy family, Oswald's childhood was not easy. His parents' marriage was troubled, with frequent conflicts stemming from his father's infidelity and domineering behavior. Eventually, they separated in all but name, and Oswald was sent to live with his grandparents at their large estate, Apedale Hall in Staffordshire. Oswald Mosley's formal education began at West Downs Preparatory School, an institution known for its emphasis on discipline and academic rigor. He later attended Winchester College, an elite school established in the 14th century. Winchester was a feeder institution for Oxford University, attracting students from Britain's upper class. At Winchester, Oswald excelled in sports, particularly boxing and fencing. His remarkable fencing skills suggested he could have pursued a professional career in the sport under different circumstances. In 1913, at the age of 16, Mosley left Winchester College. Unlike many of his peers who pursued higher education at Oxford, Mosley chose to enroll at the Royal Military College at Sandhurst. Sandhurst was a prestigious training academy for young men preparing for military service, especially those from noble families. At the time, military service was considered a duty for Britain's aristocracy, aligning with the broader goals of protecting the British Empire. While at Sandhurst, Mosley's rebellious nature became apparent. Known for his strong-willed and quarrelsome personality, he frequently got into trouble. He often drank excessively and instigated fights, leading to disciplinary actions. In the summer of 1914, a brawl at Sandhurst resulted in a fractured ankle for Mosley, and he was subsequently expelled from the college. Despite this setback, the outbreak of World War I later that year provided Mosley with another opportunity to join the military. He was commissioned into the 16th Queen's Lancers, a cavalry regiment. This marked the beginning of his military service, during which he would encounter significant challenges that would shape the course of his early life. At the start of World War I in 1914, Oswald Mosley joined the 16th Queen's Lancers, a cavalry regiment. The war's early days saw the introduction of new strategies and technologies such as aerial reconnaissance and warfare, which captured Mosley's interest. He quickly pursued training as a pilot in the Royal Flying Corps, an emerging branch of the military focused on aviation. By 1915, Mosley had completed his pilot training. However, his career as a pilot took a disastrous turn when he crashed his plane during a demonstration in front of his mother at Shoreham. The crash severely injured his right ankle, which had already been fractured during a brawl at Sandhurst in 1914. The recurring injury worsened his condition, and his ankle never fully healed. Despite this, Mosley returned to active duty in France before his injury was properly treated. Mosley's decision to return to the trenches aggravated his condition. He collapsed from pain during the Battle of Loos in 1915. Following this, doctors warned him that continued strain on his injured leg could lead to amputation. In 1916, Mosley reluctantly returned to England to recover. While he avoided losing his leg, he was left with a permanent limp that would affect him for the rest of his life. Due to his injuries, Mosley spent the remainder of the war in administrative roles. He worked at the Foreign Office and the Ministry of Munitions, gaining experience in government operations. His eagerness to serve on the front lines, despite his injuries, earned him respect among his peers and the political elite. This period marked the beginning of Mosley's journey into public service and politics. After World War I ended in 1918, Oswald Mosley's political journey began. Senior members of the Conservative Party approached him to contest the general election that year. At just 22 years old, Mosley stood as a candidate for the Harrow constituency. He won the election easily, becoming the youngest member of the British Parliament at the time. Mosley quickly gained attention for his powerful oratory skills, which set him apart from many of his parliamentary colleagues. His speeches were well articulated and engaging, helping him establish a strong presence in the House of Commons. Representing Harrow, Mosley worked diligently to address national issues while building his reputation as a promising young politician. In 1922, Mosley was re-elected as Harrow's representative. However, his political views began to shift during this period. He grew increasingly critical of the Conservative Party's policies, particularly regarding their stance on post-war economic recovery and their handling of social reforms. These frustrations led to a significant turning point in his career. Later that year, Mosley made the bold decision to leave the Conservative Party. Initially, he served as an independent member of Parliament. This marked the start of a transformative phase in his political life, as he sought to align himself with policies that better reflected his evolving ideals. Mosley's early political career laid the groundwork for the controversial yet impactful trajectory he would follow in the years to come. In the late 19-teens, Oswald Mosley began a relationship with Cynthia Blanche Curzon, the daughter of George Curzon, the first Marquess of Kettleston and a prominent British statesman. George Curzon had held influential positions, including serving as Viceroy of British India and Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs. Despite concerns that Mosley might be pursuing Cynthia for her wealth and social connections, her father reluctantly gave his blessing to the union. Oswald and Cynthia were married in May 1920. The couple had 3 children, Vivian and Nicholas, born in the early years of their marriage, and Michael, born later in 1932. Their marriage appeared stable on the surface, but it was marked by significant turmoil behind closed doors. Mosley's personal life was rife with controversy. He engaged in multiple affairs, including relationships with Cynthia's younger sister, Alexandra, and even Cynthia's stepmother, Grace Curzon. These relationships created considerable tension within the Curzon family, further complicating an already tumultuous marriage. Despite the chaos in their personal lives, Cynthia shared some of Mosley's political interests. She supported the labor movement and was even influenced by radical figures such as Leon Trotsky. Cynthia's perspectives contributed to Mosley's gradual shift to more left-leaning political ideals during the 1920s. Their relationship, though fraught with difficulties, had a profound impact on Mosley's political and personal development. In 1922, Oswald Mosley made a pivotal decision in his political career by leaving the Conservative Party. Disillusioned with their policies, he initially served as an independent member of Parliament. Over time, his political views shifted further to the left, driven by dissatisfaction with how the British government handled key issues such as economic inequality and the Irish War of Independence. Mosley's opposition to the government's use of the Black and Tan irregular forces during the Irish conflict was a key factor in his departure from the Conservatives. These forces, known for their brutality, committed widespread atrocities in Ireland, which Mosley strongly condemned. By 1924, Mosley formally joined the Labour Party, believing their policies better aligned with his vision for social and economic reform. Despite his dedication to labor ideals, Mosley faced challenges within the party. In October 1924, the first Labour government, led by Ramsay MacDonald, collapsed after less than a year. During the subsequent election, Mosley ran as a Labour candidate for the Ladywood constituency in Birmingham, traditionally a Conservative stronghold. Although he came close to defeating Neville Chamberlain, a future Prime Minister, Mosley ultimately lost the race under controversial circumstances. After this defeat, Mosley took a brief hiatus from politics. He traveled extensively with his wife, Cynthia, visiting Europe and the British Empire. Their travels included a significant visit to India, where Mosley met Mahatma Gandhi, whose philosophy of nonviolence left a lasting impression on him. This period of reflection and exposure to global perspectives influenced Mosley's evolving political ideology and prepared him for his eventual return to Parliament in the late 1920s. By the late 1920s, Oswald Mosley's frustrations with the Labour Party had grown significantly. He believed the party lacked the bold economic strategies necessary to address the rising unemployment and economic stagnation caused by the Great Depression. In 1930, Mosley proposed the Mosley Memorandum, a policy document that called for state intervention in the economy, including tariffs to protect British industry, nationalization of key sectors, and educational reforms to create a dynamic middle class. Although praised by economists like John Maynard Keynes, the Labour Party rejected Mosley's proposals. Disillusioned, Mosley left the Labour Party in 1931 to form his own political organization, the New Party. The New Party initially gained some support, including a handful of Labour members of Parliament. Its policies focused on addressing economic challenges through protectionism and state-led development. However, the New Party failed to gain traction and performed poorly in the 1931 general election. In 1932, Mosley dissolved the New Party and established the British Union of Fascists BUF, influenced by the growing fascist movements in Europe. The BUF adopted elements of Italian and German fascism, promoting nationalism, corporatism, and authoritarian leadership. Mosley implemented distinctive symbols and uniforms, including the infamous black shirts worn by BUF members. The BUF attracted a diverse membership, including some prominent figures and financial support from sections of the British media, such as the Daily Mail. However, the party also faced significant opposition due to its xenophobic rhetoric and growing ties to Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime in Germany. Throughout the 1930s, the BUF organized large rallies and marches, gaining visibility but little electoral success. Public backlash against their anti-Semitic policies and violent confrontations, such as the Battle of Cable Street in 1936, damaged the BUF's reputation. Despite these setbacks, Mosley remained committed to the BUF's vision, solidifying his controversial role in British politics. As the leader of the British Union of Fascists BUF, Oswald Mosley developed strong ties with prominent fascist movements across Europe. During the 1930s, Mosley admired and aligned himself with leaders such as Benito Mussolini in Italy and Adolf Hitler in Germany. He viewed their authoritarian regimes as models for reviving Britain's economy and national pride amidst the Great Depression. Mosley's relationship with Adolf Hitler was particularly controversial. In 1936, Mosley married Diana Mitford, a member of Britain's aristocracy, in a private ceremony held at the home of Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister. Adolf Hitler attended the wedding as a guest of honor, further solidifying Mosley's connection to the Nazi regime. Inspired by European fascist ideologies, Mosley adopted many of their practices within the BUF, including militaristic uniforms, grand rallies, and the promotion of corporatism. However, his growing admiration for these regimes came at a cost. The BUF's public image suffered as Mosley's alignment with Germany and Italy raised suspicions about his loyalty to Britain. particularly as tensions in Europe escalated toward war. Mosley's ties to European fascism also shaped the BUF's policies. The party adopted increasingly xenophobic rhetoric, targeting Jewish and immigrant communities in Britain. These views led to growing public backlash and violent clashes, such as the Battle of Cable Street in 1936, where anti-fascist groups successfully opposed a BUF march in London. Despite his efforts to gain political influence, Mosley's association with European fascism alienated many Britons. By the late 1930s, his relationships with Hitler and Mussolini became a liability, further isolating the BUF as World War II approached. When World War II began in 1939, Oswald Mosley's position as the leader of the British Union of Fascists BUF became increasingly precarious. His public admiration for Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini, along with the BUF's anti-Semitic and pro-German rhetoric, raised concerns about his loyalty to Britain. Many viewed Mosley and the BUF as a potential fifth column that could undermine Britain's efforts during the war. In May 1940, as German forces advanced through Europe and Britain, prepared for possible invasion, Mosley was arrested under Defense Regulation 18B. This emergency legislation allowed the British government to detain individuals suspected of posing a threat to national security without formal charges or trial. Mosley's wife, Diana Mitford, was also detained, and the couple was held in internment for 3 years. Although Mosley was a controversial figure, he received favorable treatment during his internment, partly due to his aristocratic connections and the intervention of Winston Churchill. Churchill had admired Mosley's potential in the 1920s, and his wife Clementine had family ties to Diana. As a result, Mosley and Diana were allowed to live together under relatively comfortable conditions at Holloway Prison. By 1943, the course of the war had shifted in favor of the Allies, reducing concerns about the BUF's influence. Following public debate in the House of Commons, Mosley and Diana were released and placed under house arrest for the remainder of the war. Despite his internment, Mosley remained unrepentant about his views and his ties to European fascist movements. Following World War II, Oswald Mosley sought to rebuild his political career despite widespread public disapproval. Released from house arrest in 1945, Mosley faced significant challenges as his association with fascism and support for Nazi Germany had tarnished his reputation. However, he was determined to re-enter politics and began reconnecting with former members of the British Union of Fascists. In 1946 and 1947, Mosley published 2 political works, My Answer and The Alternative. These books defended his actions during the 1930s and attempted to reframe him as a British patriot unfairly maligned during the war. Mosley argued that his policies had aimed to prevent war and protect British interests, a narrative that failed to resonate with the public. In 1948, Mosley founded the Union Movement, a new political organization that sought to revive elements of his pre-war ideology. The movement promoted pan-Europeanism, proposing a union of European nations to counterbalance the influence of the United States and the Soviet Union during the emerging Cold War. While innovative in concept, the Union movement retained elements of Mosley's earlier racial rhetoric, which further alienated the British public. Despite his efforts, Mosley's post-war political campaigns met with little success. His attempt to run for office in 1959, capitalizing on racial tensions in London, ended in failure. By the early 1960s, Mosley's influence in British politics had waned significantly. Mosley's post-war activities reflected his refusal to fully renounce his earlier views. Although his pan-European vision anticipated aspects of the European Union, his controversial past prevented him from gaining the political legitimacy he sought. After World War II, Oswald Mosley shifted his focus toward promoting a vision of European unity. In 1947, he outlined this vision in his book, The Alternative, where he proposed the creation of a unified European state called Europe a Nation. Mosley argued that the unification of European nations under a centralized authority would ensure their independence from the influence of the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. In 1948, Mosley founded the Union Movement, a political organization designed to champion his pan-European ideology. The movement advocated for economic and political integration among European nations, proposing policies such as a common European Parliament and coordinated economic strategies. These ideas anticipated elements of what would later become the European Union. However, the Union movement retained controversial aspects of Mosley's earlier politics, including racial segregation and anti-migration policies. Mosley's insistence on dividing Africa into white and black-controlled regions mirrored the apartheid system in South Africa, alienating potential supporters. Despite these challenges, Mosley attempted to unite far-right movements across Europe. In 1962, he helped establish the National Party of Europe, an alliance of far-right parties from several countries. While the party promoted European unity, its associations with fascism and racial segregation prevented it from gaining significant influence. Mosley's advocacy for pan-Europeanism reflected his desire to adapt his political vision to the post-war world, but his controversial past continued to hinder his efforts. Oswald Mosley's post-war political ideology continued to be shaped by his racial views, which remained a central and divisive aspect of his career. Following the end of World War II, Mosley opposed the growing immigration of people from Britain's colonies, particularly from the Caribbean and South Asia. These immigrants, often referred to as the Windrush generation, began arriving in large numbers during the late 1940s to fill labor shortages caused by the war. In response to this demographic shift, Mosley campaigned on policies that included strict limits on immigration and the forced deportation of certain migrant groups. He also advocated for racial segregation, proposing measures to prevent intermarriage and maintain what he called the purity of British society. These views alienated much of the British public and further marginalized Mosley's political efforts. In the 1950s, Mosley extended his racial policies to an international stage. He proposed a form of continent-wide apartheid in Africa, advocating for the division of the continent into separate regions controlled by white and black populations. This vision echoed the policies of apartheid South Africa, which Mosley openly supported. Mosley's rhetoric often inflamed tensions. During his 1959 campaign in the Kensington district of London, he capitalized on racial unrest following the Notting Hill race riots, using anti-migration sentiments as a platform. Although he received nearly 10% of the vote, his inflammatory policies failed to secure him a seat in Parliament. Mosley's racial views defined much of his post-war political legacy. They overshadowed any contributions he made to the discussion of European unity, leaving him remembered as a controversial and divisive figure in British politics. In the early 1960s, Oswald Mosley relocated to France with his wife, Diana Mitford, seeking to escape the hostility he faced in Britain. The couple settled in the wealthy suburb of Orsay, near Paris, where Mosley spent his later years writing and reflecting on his political career. Despite his controversial past, Mosley continued to advocate for pan-Europeanism and sought to align far-right movements across Europe. In 1962, Mosley co-founded the National Party of Europe, an alliance of far-right political organizations from several countries. The party promoted a vision of European unity, but its association with neo-fascist ideals prevented it from gaining widespread support. By the late 1960s, Mosley's health began to decline, and his political influence waned. Mosley published his autobiography, My Life, in 1968, attempting to defend his controversial career. The book highlighted his belief in European unity and his justification for past actions. However, it failed to rehabilitate his public image, as many viewed his fascist associations and racial policies as irredeemable. In his final years, Mosley struggled with Parkinson's disease and largely withdrew from public life. He passed away in Orsay on December 3, 1980, at the age of 84. His remains were cremated, and his ashes were scattered in Père-Lachaise Cemetery in Paris. Oswald Mosley remains a polarizing figure in British history. While his vision of European unity foreshadowed elements of the European Union, his legacy is overshadowed by his fascist ideology and racial policies. What do you think about Oswald Mosley's life and legacy? Should he be remembered as a visionary for European unity or a controversial advocate of fascism? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful content. Thank you very much for watching.